All right, well, good morning. I'm Mark Gibbas, the CEO of WeatherSource. I'm very happy to be here with you. WeatherSource is a weather information provider to the financial industry and many others. We provide curated, pristine weather information globally and temporally. So we have weather information covering all locations across the planet and temporally back to the year 2000. So think of it as a continuum of weather information over time and space. Today, I'm here to tell you about a new weather product we're bringing to the Battlefin ensemble, and that is our weather impact indices. We have two flavors of these. We have consumer impact indices and business impact indices. In the consumer side, we have a few different varieties. We have the outdoor indices, which is kind of a general understanding of how weather is impacting outdoor activities. And then we have some specific ones for winter sports, summer fun, and commuting indices. You might wonder, why do you need so many different types of indices to describe the weather? Well, consumers have different behaviors that they engage in, and weather has different effects. So, for example, commuting indices really don't have that much influence of temperature on them. We can drive through any temperature, but rain and snow make a big difference. So there are some nuances that have to be accounted for in these indices. The business impact indices are industry specific. So for example, for construction and building supply, or retail and restaurants, insurance and energy and utilities. All of these industry sectors have different influences, or the weather has different influences on these sectors that needs to be handled in different ways. Let's get to some examples that we have here. We're going to look at our consumer impact indice, and specifically the outdoor activities index. For these, we have several time segments of the day that are offered. You have morning, which is like your commute time or breakfast time, lunch time, afternoon, dinner, evening, the overnight hours, the full 24-hour day, and the business day. We chunk that up into different times because different businesses have different operating times. And if you have a business that's primarily operating in the morning, say a Starbucks, you might want to use that indice because that's going to be where the consumers are most active. All of these indices have a theoretical range of 0 to 100. An index, when it's optimum, is at 100, and then it gets reduced by different types of weather effects. So for example, rainfall and snowfall will decrease the value of the index. And the more it rains or snows, the more the decrease is applied. For the temperature aspect, we use the feels like temperature. Feels like temperature takes into account humidity and wind, and it has more of a realistic, meaningful impact on consumers. When it's very humid, even though the actual air temperature isn't too warm, it really feels like it is when you're outside. So we use the feels like index, and for temperatures between a feels like index of 65 to 80, the index stays at 100. But once you get outside those bounds, the index starts to come down. And the more extreme you get, the more the index comes down. Finally, the impacts of rainfall and snowfall and feels like are combined into one unified score. That way there you have just one number to look at. So all of the feature engineering of the weather impacts on consumers is taken into account. Let's dive a little bit more into this. What are some of the benefits of these indices? Well, the first one is that weather is summarized into meaningful parts of the day. So you don't have to go through the process of trying to understand and parse weather information to target specific portions of the day that are meaningful to you. Another important thing is that weather extremes have a nonlinear impact on behavior, which is managed in the index. What does that mean? Well, a little bit of rainfall, say a tenth of an inch, will maybe be a little bit of a nuisance, but a half an inch will really start to drive people to do different things. It seems like a small amount, but it's a big difference. And that is baked into these indices. The other part is that multiple weather impacts can be summarized into a single convenient index. For many years now, people who've been attempting to do data science with weather have been challenged by trying to understand how different weather elements of wind and temperature and cloud cover can have an impact. And they'll find some signal, but it's difficult to get consistent signal across all of the weather variables. This index takes all of that into account and gives you one single number that can be meaningful to different consumers. Finally, and this is an important one, local climates are managed. It may not be obvious, but the weather isn't the same everywhere. Seattle gets a lot of rain, San Diego hardly any at all. So when you do get a little bit of rain in San Diego, is that the same? Does that have the same effect as the same amount of rain in Seattle? The answer is no. In Seattle, people are used to a lot of rain. So that needs to be baked into the index as well. Same can be said for the impact of snow in Buffalo versus Atlanta. Buffalo gets snow many, many days of the year, and Atlanta might get snow once every few years, and the impacts are quite different. Let's take a look at an actual case of a snowstorm that happened in Denver just this past March 14th. What we have here is a table of the indices for a store located near the Denver area and for dates in March going from March 8th through the 19th. The weather was pretty nice for most of this period of time. The precipitation indices were pegged at 100, meaning that there was no precipitation and it was great weather going for quite a number of days. Temperatures were in the 40s to 30s. So the temperature indexes were still pretty high. But then we had some a good snow event. This is for the hours between 7 a.m. and 11 a.m. This is the morning index. There was a recording of 0.2 inches of liquid equivalent precip, and we know that it was snowing because we have a snow indicator here. That brought these indices down. We have a min, a max, and an average indice for the precipitation. Brought those down into basically the 60s and 70s. Temperature indices also dropped, and your combined indice dropped from what was in the 90s down into the 70s. So this is a very convenient way of being able to take a complex weather situation and bringing it down to meaningful numbers that can be brought into machine learning tools very easily. So that is the quick summary of our new weather indices. We're very excited to bring these to the Battlefin ensemble. If you have more questions and you want to reach out, please do so. My contact information is right here, Mark Gibbas at weathersource.com. We'd be happy to give you more information. Also be looking for more development kits on these indices with plenty of tutorials on how to get going. So thank you very much. Happy to be here.